The desert sun beat down on the asphalt as Maria pulled into a remote truck stop, unaware that 3 men had been watching her for miles. They thought she was an easy target, just another woman alone on the road. But when they stepped forward to hijack her rig, they had no idea who they were dealing with. If you love stories of unstoppable truckers, real justice, and the road's toughest warriors, hit subscribe now. Don't miss the next insane showdown. You never know who's behind the wheel. The sun hung low over the desolate desert highway, casting long, golden streaks across the asphalt. Heat waves shimmered off the road, distorting the horizon as the rumble of an 18-wheeler echoed through the emptiness. The massive rig, a midnight blue Peterbilt with chrome stacks gleaming in the sun, thundered forward, cutting through the vast landscape. Behind the wheel sat Elena Vega, a woman whose presence commanded respect long before anyone ever saw her credentials. Her long, sun-streaked hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, a worn leather jacket draped over her shoulders, and a firm grip on the wheel as she hummed to the soft country tune playing on the radio. Elena wasn't just any trucker. Few knew her past. Fewer dared to question it. A former Marine Corps combat instructor, she had traded war zones for highways, swapping battlefields for the open road. The solitude suited her. No bureaucracy, no politics, just miles of freedom stretching before her. But she wasn't naive. The road had its own dangers, and she knew that better than most. As she glanced at her side mirror, her sharp brown eyes caught the glint of movement behind her. 3 vehicles, dark-tinted windows, 2 pickup trucks and a muscle car tailing her too close. They had been following her for miles, but now they were closing the distance. Her gut twisted. Something was wrong. The first truck veered into the oncoming lane, accelerating alongside her rig. The driver, a man in his mid-30s, tan skin, tattoos snaking up his arms, gave her a slow, knowing smirk before pointing his finger like a gun at her. A warning. The second truck moved up on the other side, boxing her in. The muscle car sped ahead, cutting sharply into her lane and forcing her to slow down. A well-coordinated hijacking attempt. Elena's grip tightened around the wheel, her pulse steady. She had been in worse situations. Combat missions in Kandahar, high-stakes operations in enemy territory. This was nothing more than a bad decision on their part. As she eased off the gas, the trucks matched her pace, closing the trap. One of the men leaned out of the passenger side, gripping a wooden bat, slapping it against his palm, flashing a grin full of gold teeth. They thought she was just another trucker, easy prey on an empty road. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Elena reached down slowly, flipping open a hidden compartment beneath her seat. Her fingers brushed against the cold, reassuring metal of her 1911 custom pistol, a weapon she had carried for years, one that had saved her life more than once. Her lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. They wanted to play? They had no idea what was coming. The convoy of hijackers had her boxed in. The lead car had slowed to a crawl in front of her, while the 2 trucks flanked her on either side. Their message was clear. Pull over, or we'll make you. Elena Vega wasn't one to take orders. One of the gang members in the pickup to her right leaned out, gripping a crowbar. He smacked it against the side of her trailer, the metal-on-metal sound sharp against the empty desert. Pull over, mamacita. We just want to talk. His grin was wide, cocky. He thought she was afraid. Elena took a deep breath. Amateurs. She faked compliance, slowing down just enough to make them believe she was going to stop. The muscle car in front of her began to brake harder, its driver assuming they had her trapped. That was their mistake. With a quick twist of the wheel, she yanked her rig to the left, just enough to clip the pickup beside her, sending it skidding off the road. The driver lost control, overcorrecting and spinning out into the desert dust. Before the others could react, she slammed the accelerator to the floor. The sheer torque of the truck's massive diesel engine roared to life, tires screeching as she bulldozed straight for the muscle car blocking her path. The driver panicked, trying to veer away at the last second, but Elena didn't give him that chance. She clipped his back bumper, sending him into a violent spin. But the second truck was still there. A sharp pop, pop, pop rang out. Gunfire. A man in the remaining pickup leaned out, 9mm in hand, squeezing off shots at her driver's side window. The first round cracked the glass, spiderwebbing across the surface. The second missed entirely. Elena didn't flinch. Instead, she reached for her 1911 pistol, rolled down the window slightly, and without taking her eyes off the road, fired 2 clean shots. Bang! Bang! The shooter cried out, dropping his weapon as the rounds slammed into his truck's engine block, sending up sparks. Smoke poured from the hood as the vehicle sputtered and began to lose power. "You messed with the wrong trucker!" Elena growled, shifting gears and pushing the 18-wheeler to full throttle. The last hijacker, the one who had been driving the lead car, was now desperately trying to speed away. Elena gritted her teeth and did something insane. Instead of braking, she surged forward. The front grille of her semi slammed into the car's rear bumper, lifting the back tires off the ground. The man behind the wheel screamed, trying to control the fishtailing vehicle, but it was no use. Elena pushed the car off the road, sending it tumbling into the sand. She looked in her mirrors. The dust was settling. The road behind her was littered with wreckage. The gang had thought she was an easy target. They thought wrong. The road ahead was clear, but Elena knew better than to let her guard down. She'd dealt with men like this before, cocky, overconfident, and too dumb to know when they'd lost. And she was right. In her side mirror, she saw one of the hijackers, the one who had been in the pickup, stumbling out of the wreckage, gripping something metallic. A gun. "Idiots never learn," she muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. She could hear the faint sound of an engine revving behind her. One of the hijackers still had a working vehicle, and they weren't running away. No, they were chasing her down. The truck stop was just ahead, her best chance at dealing with them on her terms. She shifted gears, speeding toward the lot. By the time she pulled in, the hijackers were on her, tires screeching as they skidded to a stop just feet away from her rig. 3 of them jumped out. One had a bat, another had a knife, and the third, the man who had been grinning at her earlier, was holding a pistol. "Come on out, sweetheart," he called, wiping dust from his face. "Let's have a chat." Elena exhaled slowly, flexing her fingers. She didn't walk away from fights, she finished them. The moment she stepped out of the cab, every trucker in the lot turned to look. This was her kind of crowd, hardened men and women who had seen too much to scare easy. The hijackers, though? They had no idea they were standing in the middle of a hornet's nest. Elena squared her shoulders, her cold, unflinching gaze locking onto the man with the pistol. "You got one chance to walk away," she said, her voice low, dangerous. The thug chuckled, shaking his head. "Lady, you don't get it." A shotgun racked behind him. Then another. Then another. Every trucker in the lot was armed. The gang froze as nearly a dozen truckers stood, weapons in hand, faces like stone. Elena smirked. "Now, let's try this again," she said, stepping forward. "You got one chance to walk away, or we're gonna make you regret ever stepping foot on this lot." The hijackers' faces paled. They weren't in control anymore, and Elena knew it. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The hijackers' eyes darted between the truckers, their confidence melting into cold, hard fear. A dozen men and women stood ready, fingers resting near triggers, faces unreadable. Elena took a slow step forward, her boots crunching against the gravel. "What's it gonna be, boys?" she asked, tilting her head. The leader, the one with the pistol, swallowed hard. His bravado was gone now. He had thought they were hijacking a lone trucker, an easy target. But now, he was realizing his mistake. He turned to his men. "Let's get out of here," he muttered. But one of them, one who hadn't spoken before, held his ground. "El Jefe's not gonna like this," he said under his breath. "You know what happens if we back out." Elena's smirk faded. El Jefe. She'd heard the name before, a cartel enforcer who ran these roads like he owned them. If these guys were working for him, this wasn't just a random hijacking. They had been sent for her. The leader hesitated, the weight of that truth settling on his shoulders. He glanced around the lot, sweat beading at his temple. The realization hit him all at once. If he stayed, he'd die. If he ran, he was dead anyway. But Elena had dealt with worse men than him. She squared her stance, her gaze locking onto the pistol in his hand. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Your boss ain't here. You got a choice. Walk away or end up face down in the dirt." For a second, it seemed like he might listen. Then he made his choice. With a desperate shout, he swung his gun up. Bang! Before he could even aim, a shotgun roared. The blast threw him backward, his pistol flying from his grip. He hit the ground hard, clutching his arm where buckshot had shredded his jacket. The truckers didn't hesitate. Before the other hijackers could react, the truckers closed in, disarming them, kicking them to the dirt, pinning them down. Elena bent down, grabbing the wounded leader by the collar. His breath was ragged, his hands trembling. The tough guy act was gone. "You tell El Jefe something for me," she whispered. He blinked, sweat dripping into his eyes. "Tell him if he wants my truck, my cargo, or my life, he better come himself." She released him, letting him slump against the dirt. The truck stop owner stepped forward, arms crossed. "What do you want to do with him?" Elena wiped the dust from her hands and looked around. The truckers were watching her, waiting. These were her people, men and women who lived by a code. She exhaled sharply. "Let 'em go. They'll carry the message better than a corpse." The truckers stepped back, watching as the hijackers scrambled to their feet. The leader clutched his bleeding arm, looking up at Elena with pure hatred. "This ain't over," he hissed. Elena just smiled. "For your sake, I hope it is." The gang didn't need telling twice. They ran. Elena stood, watching them disappear into the desert. She knew what was coming. El Jefe wasn't going to like losing, but she wasn't worried. This wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. Elena watched the dust settle as the gang disappeared into the horizon. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the truck stop, but the tension in the air remained thick. The other truckers stood still, waiting for her to say something. She took a deep breath, adjusting her leather jacket. She knew what this meant. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. El Jefe wouldn't let this go. He wasn't the type to let a failed hijacking slide, especially not when it came with this level of humiliation. But that didn't scare her. She turned to the other truckers, their faces worn and hardened from years on the road. Some of them had fought alongside her, some had simply stood their ground, but all of them had made a choice today. They had chosen not to be victims. "This is our road," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And no cartel, no gang, no thug is gonna take it from us." The truckers nodded in agreement. Some spat into the dirt, others cracked their knuckles. This wasn't just about one hijacking anymore. This was about something bigger. The truck stop owner, an older man with a grizzled beard and a cigarette hanging from his lips, stepped forward. "You know they'll be back, right?" he said, his voice low. Elena gave him a knowing smirk. "Yeah, but next time, we'll be ready." She turned back to her truck, brushing the dust off the door before pulling herself into the cab. The others followed suit, climbing into their rigs, ready to move out. The hum of diesel engines filled the air as they prepared to roll. But before she could start the engine, a voice crackled over her CB radio. "Elena, you there?" She frowned, grabbing the receiver. Who's asking? There was a pause, then a deep, gravelly chuckle. You know who. Her stomach tightened. El Jefe. The voice on the other end was calm, almost amused. I heard what you did. Got my boys running back with their tails between their legs. Not many people can say that. Elena didn't respond. She just waited. But you and I both know this ain't over, querida. She clenched her jaw. Guess we'll see about that. El Jefe chuckled again. I like you. Got fire. But let me give you a piece of advice. There's only so much road to run, and I got eyes everywhere. Enjoy your victory. It won't last. The radio cut out. Elena exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel. She wasn't afraid, but she wasn't stupid either. This was just the beginning. She flicked on her headlights and put the truck into gear. As she pulled onto the open road, the other truckers followed, their rigs forming a convoy, rolling together like a steel fortress. She glanced at her rearview mirror one last time. The truck stop, the fight, the hijackers, it was all behind her now. But the road ahead? That was hers to claim.